At the Millbrook Regional Airport outside Knoxville, a woman sat alone at Gate C14 with a carry-on bag across her lap and a paper coffee cup going cold on the seat beside her. The gate area was full. A man in a golf shirt rolled a carry-on past her without looking. A flight attendant in full uniform asked if she was waiting for someone to help her to the jetway. She said she was fine. The flight attendant nodded and moved on. Then the overhead lights flickered, the gate agent announced a 2-hour delay, and a collective groan moved through the terminal like a wave. A man came through the C concourse doors holding a 6-year-old girl by the hand. The girl had a backpack shaped like a turtle and one sneaker untied. The man stopped near the gate counter, looked at the crowded rows, looked at his daughter, and found the only 2 open seats in the area. One was beside the woman with the cold coffee. He walked over. He put the turtle backpack in the overhead rack, sat down, helped his daughter with the sneaker, and then turned to the woman beside him. He said, "I'm sorry in advance. She will definitely talk to you." The woman looked at the girl, who was already looking back with the frank assessment of someone who had not yet learned to pretend otherwise. "That's all right," the woman said. The girl said, "Your bag has wheels." "It does. My dad's bag has wheels too, but his are broken and they make a sound." "Peanut," the man said. "It's true," the girl said. The woman smiled. It was the first time she had smiled in the terminal. She had been there since 6:40 in the morning. 14 days before the delay, on a Wednesday in late March, Griffin Sato was standing at the back of a courtroom in Knox County, with a legal pad in one hand and a cup of gas station coffee in the other. The courtroom was half empty. The case on the docket was a custody modification, not his, but his client's ex-wife's attorney had filed a motion to postpone, and Griffin had driven 40 minutes from his office in Maryville to be told the case was being pushed to May. He was 39. He ran a 2-person family law practice out of a converted Victorian on Lamar Street. The second person was his paralegal, a 63-year-old woman named Patsy, who kept a Bible on her desk and a bottle of bourbon in the bottom drawer for what she called the same category of emergency. Griffin's daughter, Ivy, had been in kindergarten for 7 months and had strong opinions about which sandwiches were acceptable and which were a betrayal. He drove back to Maryville with the radio off. At pickup, Ivy ran to him across the school parking lot with her arms wide, the way she had done every single day since August, as if each reunion required full physical commitment. "Dad," she said into his jacket, "we learned about volcanoes. Were they scary?" "No. They're just the earth getting something out." He buckled her in and thought about that for most of the drive home. Celia had been gone for 2 years and 4 months. She had not died. She had left, which was, Griffin had come to understand, its own kind of geography to learn to navigate. The house on Birchwood Court was his and Ivy's now, with the same furniture and the same kitchen and the same back porch where Celia had kept her garden, which Griffin had tried to maintain for 1 full season before he acknowledged, honestly, that he was keeping it alive out of guilt and not because he had any idea what he was doing. He let it go in the fall. By spring, something he hadn't planted had come up along the fence. The firm's big case that quarter was a contract review for a nonprofit affordable housing developer. Not glamorous, but the developer, a woman named Frances Adair, had built 47 units in 2 years for families coming out of transitional housing, and Griffin had negotiated her land acquisition agreement for less than a third of what the opposing counsel had expected to spend. That was the work he was most proud of, and also the work that never made the Bar Association newsletter. On the morning of the Knoxville flight, he was taking Ivy to see his mother in Portland, Oregon for spring break. He had booked the tickets in January. He had packed the turtle backpack himself, which meant it contained 2 books, an extra pair of socks, 3 granola bars, and a small stuffed rabbit named Bench that Ivy had named after a park bench she had liked very much in Gatlinburg the previous fall. He had not told his mother about Celia. He had not told her because his mother would worry in a specific and sustained way that would turn the trip into a conversation about his well-being instead of a trip to see his mother. He was going to tell her in person, in the kitchen after Ivy went to sleep. He had been planning this for 6 months. He did not expect the delay. He did not expect the gate area to be so full. He did not expect the woman with the cold coffee to have a carry-on bag with wheels that were not broken. Simone Adair had been awake since 4:15. She ran a 30-person architecture firm out of Portland. Her mother had built the practice from a 2-desk studio in the 90s. Simone had taken over at 32 when her mother retired to coastal Maine. She was now 41. The firm, Adair Associates, specialized in adaptive reuse and civic architecture. They had converted a decommissioned mill in Lowell into mixed-income housing. They had redesigned the public library branch in East Portland to serve as a community anchor for a neighborhood that had been without a gathering space for 11 years. She was flying home from a site visit in Knoxville, a school gymnasium conversion. The project was over budget, and the general contractor had just walked off the job, and she had spent 2 days in a folding chair in an unfinished building, working through it with the school principal and a structural engineer who communicated Sealer's eyes and head nods. She was tired in the way that had nothing to do with sleep. It was the tiredness that came from carrying a project alone when it should have been carried by more people. She had been carrying things alone for a while. Her last relationship had ended 3 years ago. He had been kind and good and not interested in staying in Portland, and she had not been interested in leaving. They had parted without angers, which was sometimes worse. She had thrown herself into the mill conversion. The mill conversion had been her most celebrated project. She had stood at the ribbon cutting and shaken 60 hands and come home to an apartment with no one in it and eaten cereal for dinner. She was not looking for anything at gate C14. She was looking at the departure board, which had just changed from on time to delayed, and calculating how this would affect the rest of her day. Then the man sat down next to her and warned her about his daughter. Over the 2 hours of the delay, Ivy talked to Simone about volcanoes, about the turtle backpack, about a boy in her class named Jasper who ate his crayons and then denied it, even though his teeth were blue, and about the small stuffed rabbit named Bench, who Ivy produced from the front pocket and introduced formally. Simone learned that Bench had been named after a bench. She learned that Ivy's father made the best scrambled eggs in Maryville, but that his sandwiches were a problem. She learned that Ivy had been to Portland once before when she was a baby, but did not remember it, which Ivy felt was unfair. Griffin, across his daughter's running commentary, learned almost nothing about the woman beside them. He gathered that she was going to Portland. He gathered that she had good manners and a real smile, the kind that started in the eyes before it got to the mouth. He did not ask what she did or where she was coming from, because Ivy had not left a pause long enough to insert a question. At one point Ivy fell asleep against his arm, mid-sentence, the way children do, instantly and completely, as if someone had switched off a light. The gate area was quieter now. A few people had moved to the food court. The departure board still said delayed. Griffin said quietly, "I'm sorry about all of that." "Don't be," Simone said. "She's the best thing that's happened to me today." He looked at her. She was looking at Ivy, and her expression was one he recognized, not pity, not performance, but something genuine and a little unguarded. "She named the rabbit after a bench," he said. "She told me. She said it was a very good bench. It had good armrests." Simone said, "That matters." He smiled. She did not look away. When the gate agent announced boarding, Simone gathered her bag. Ivy woke up with a gasp, remembered immediately where she was, and said, "Are we going?" "We're going," Griffin said. Ivy looked at Simone. "Are you going to Portland too?" "I live there." Ivy considered this. "You could come to Grandma's for dinner. Peanut, I'm just saying." Simone crouched down to Ivy's eye level, which was not easy with a carry-on bag over one shoulder. "I think that's a very kind invitation," she said. "Maybe your dad will have enough scrambled eggs another time." Ivy looked at her father with an expression that said this was now a formal arrangement. Griffin opened his mouth, closed it. "Sure," he said. "Yeah." They boarded separately. Griffin did not ask for her name. Portland was raining when they landed. His mother met them at the curb with an umbrella and a tote bag full of food she had made the previous day in what she called preparation and what Griffin privately called an act of maternal anxiety management. Ivy ran to her grandmother with the same full-body commitment she applied to everything. His mother's name was Patricia. She was 67. She had been a high school chemistry teacher for 31 years and had the patience and the steel of someone who had taught teenagers not to blow things up. She fed them soup. She got Ivy into the bath and then into bed with a chapter of a library book about a girl who lived on a houseboat. Then she came back to the kitchen and put a cup of tea in front of Griffin and sat across from him and waited. He told her about Celia. Patricia listened with both hands around her cup. She did not interrupt. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Are you all right?" "Getting there. Is Ivy all right?" "She's better than me. She named a rabbit after a bench." Patricia looked at him. That's a good sign, actually. He told her about the delay, about the woman at the gate, about Ivy's running monologue and the invitation to dinner that he had somehow agreed to. His mother set her cup down. Did you get her name? No. She looked at him the way she had looked at students who had forgotten a basic calculation. Griffin, it was a 2-hour delay. Ivy was awake for 40 minutes of it. What did she look like? Mom. I'm asking. He thought about the smile that started in the eyes, the way she had crouched down for Ivy, the expression when Ivy was asleep. He said, like someone who carries a lot of things without making it a story. Patricia picked her cup back up. Well, she said, Portland is not that big. Simone went directly from the airport to the office. She had 3 emails from the Knoxville School Board, 2 from the structural engineer, whose communication style had evolved to include 1 additional word per message, and a call from the general contractor's replacement firm who needed her drawings reissued in a different file format by Friday. She sat at her desk at 6:15 in the evening, with the Portland rain on the windows and the office to herself, and worked until 8:30. Then she walked to the Thai place 2 blocks away and ate alone at the bar and did not mind it exactly, but did notice it. She had thought about the man and the girl twice since the flight. She did not think about men often, not because she had closed herself off to it, or at least she had told herself she hadn't, but because she was good at filling the foreground with work, and the background had a way of staying quiet. The man at the gate had not tried to fill anything. He had warned her about his daughter. He had apologized for the noise. He had made 1 joke about armrests. He had looked at her at the end, when Ivy was asleep, with the kind of attention that did not ask for anything back. She ate her dinner. She walked home in the rain. She told herself Portland was a city of 700,000 people, and that was that. On the Thursday of spring break, Griffin took Ivy to the Oregon Zoo. His mother came for the first hour, and then went to meet a friend and left them to the animals. Ivy spent 40 minutes with the elephants and delivered a detailed analysis of their ears. On the way out, they passed a small, covered bulletin board near the main entrance where the zoo posted partner organization flyers. One of the flyers had a photograph of a building. It was a photograph of what had been clearly a parking structure and was now something else, with large windows cut into the concrete and planters along the lower level and text that read Adair Associates, Adaptive Reuse, Civic Architecture, Portland, Oregon. He looked at the flyer for a longer time than he needed to read it. Ivy said, "Dad, are you reading the paper? Looking at a building?" "Why?" He didn't answer right away. He took a photo of the flyer with his phone. He had no particular reason to. He did it anyway. That evening, while Ivy slept and his mother read in the living room, he looked up Adair Associates on his phone. The website was clean and specific. The work was serious. He read the project descriptions for 20 minutes, which was not something he normally did, and then clicked on the About page. There was a photograph of the principal. Her name was Simone Adair. He put the phone down on the coffee table. His mother called from the living room. "You've gone very quiet. Just reading." He picked the phone back up. The bio said she had taken over the practice at 32. It listed the mill conversion in Lowell, the library branch in East Portland, and a civic center project in Boise that had won a regional award. It said she had a graduate degree from Columbia and had grown up in Portland. It did not say anything about what she was doing at Gate C14 in Knoxville. He put the phone down again. He did not do anything else that night. He was a family law attorney. He understood that some things required patience and precision, and the acknowledgement that acting too quickly was usually worse than waiting for the right moment. He waited. He was not the kind of man who engineered things. But on the Friday before they flew home, his mother said she was going to the farmer's market on the South Park blocks, and did he want to come? And he said yes, because Ivy loved the flower stalls. And they went, and at a coffee cart near the center of the market, he saw Simone Adair standing with a paper cup, looking at a display of early radishes with the same focused attention she had given the departure board. He almost didn't say anything. He stood for 1 full second thinking about the 700,000 people and the probability and the thing you do when you are a person who waits. Then Ivy saw her. "It's the Portland lady." Ivy pulled his hand hard to the left. "Dad, it's the Portland lady from the airport." Simone turned. She looked at Ivy first. Then she looked at Griffin. For a moment, neither of the adults said anything. Ivy said, "I told you Portland wasn't that big." They walked the market together for an hour. His mother peeled off early to the flower stalls with Ivy. giving no explanation and requiring none. Griffin and Simone walked with coffee cups they had mostly stopped drinking from and talked in the way you talk when the previous conversation happened 2 weeks ago and you are picking it up without making a production of the gap. She told him about the Knoxville project, the contractor who walked off, the structural engineer's one-word emails. He told her about the custody modification case, the 40-minute drive to be told the case was postponed. She said that sounded like most of law, and he said it was, and she said architecture wasn't much different except the waiting happened in rooms with better acoustics. He told her about finding the zoo flyer. She looked at him sidelong. You looked up the firm. I did. Why? He thought about how to answer this in a way that was accurate and not too much. He said, you crouched down for Ivy in the terminal, with the bag on your shoulder. It's not easy to do that. Simone looked at her coffee cup. She introduced me to Bench. She introduces Bench to everyone. She introduced him to the pediatrician. He seemed important. He is. They walked a little further. The market was filling up, a Saturday crowd moving through the stalls in all directions, and they had to navigate it without quite deciding to stay close, which meant they stayed close. She said, I'm usually at this market on Saturdays, he said. We fly home Monday. She looked at him. She had the same expression she'd had in the terminal when Ivy was asleep, unguarded, something real behind it. That's 2 more Saturdays, she said. He said, I'm aware of that. She did not look away. He did not either. His mother came back around the corner with Ivy, who was carrying a stem of yellow tulips she had apparently negotiated for on her own terms. She handed them to Simone with the same solemnity she applied to handing over Bench. Simone took them. The following month, Griffin filed 2 case updates, closed the Francis Adair contract review, no relation. He checked and flew to Portland on a Thursday for what he told Patsy was a client consultation, and what Patsy told him, with the precision of a woman who kept a Bible and bourbon in proximity, was no such thing. He met Simone at the East Portland Library branch. Her firm had done the renovation. She walked him through the building, the way she walked her own projects. Not performing it, not selling it, just showing him what she'd been thinking, and what had worked, and what she would do differently if she had it back. There was a reading nook in the corner of the children's section built at 2 heights, one for adults and one for small people. She said the principal contractor had pushed back on it as unnecessary. Why? Griffin said. Cost. And he said kids can just sit on the floor. They can, Griffin said. But they shouldn't have to. She looked at him. He had not meant it as anything except a sentence. But the way she looked at him made him think she had filed it somewhere. They had coffee after at a place on the next block. She had a project in Knoxville she was managing remotely until the new contractor was oriented. He had a case in Maryville that was going to settle in the next 6 weeks, and then he would have room to breathe. She asked what he did with room to breathe. He said he was still finding out. She said she had been finding out too. They sat with that for a minute without filling it in. He flew home that evening. Ivy was at her grandmother's in Portland, which meant the house on Birchwood was quiet in a way that no longer felt like a wound. Exactly, but still required adjustment. He sat on the back porch where the garden had been. The thing along the fence he hadn't planted had put out a small yellow flower he didn't know the name of. He left it alone. In June, 2 months after the airport, Simone drove to Knoxville for the school gymnasium project reopening. The new contractor had delivered on schedule. The principal, a woman named Dr. Vance, had written Simone a letter by hand on school stationery. The gymnasium had been converted into a flexible community space with a stage at one end and full accessibility at the other and acoustic panels that Simone had sourced from a manufacturer in Ohio who had never worked on a school project and was very pleased about it. At the ribbon cutting, Dr. Vance said, the person who made this possible insisted on not being introduced. I'm introducing her anyway. Simone Adair. The room was 140 people, parents, teachers, kids in gym clothes who had been pulled from PE for the occasion and were vibrating with the energy of children who have been asked to stand still. Simone stood at the edge of the stage. She was not a person who needed rooms to stand for her, but this room did, briefly, and she let it. Afterward, in the parking lot, she called Griffin. He answered on the second ring. In the background, she could hear Ivy asking about something. She said, I just thought you should know the Knoxville project finished. How was the ribbon cutting? They stood up. Of course they did. Ivy's voice in the background asked if Dad was talking to the Portland lady. Simone heard it. She pressed her lips together. Griffin said, "She wants to know if you're coming back through Knoxville anytime soon. She wants to know, or you want to know?" A pause. "Both," he said, honestly. She looked at the school, the new sign out front, the parking lot ramp that ran flush to the pavement instead of jutting out from the curb at an angle you had to navigate around. She had fought the site engineer on that ramp for 3 weeks. She had been right. She usually was. She said, "I'm flying out tomorrow morning through Knoxville Airport." Gate was quiet for a second. Then he said, "I'll be there." She said, "Griffin." "I know," he said. "I know you don't need that. I'm just saying I want to be." She looked at the ramp again, at the sign, at the building that had been a ruin of a gymnasium for 4 years and was now something anyone could walk into or roll into or let their kid loose in. She said, "I get in at 7. Ivy was asleep in the back of the car when Griffin pulled into the long-term parking structure at McGee-Tyson Airport at 6:42 the next morning. He carried her through the terminal with her head on his shoulder and her sneakers untied because he had learned months ago that tying her sneakers in the car before carrying her was a losing proposition. He found gate C14. He found 2 seats. He sat Ivy in one, buckled her lightly with the armrest, and sat in the other. He had a coffee. He drank half of it. He was not nervous exactly. He was the way he got before a good argument. Settled, clear, present. When the doors opened and the passengers came through, he stood. She came through with the carry-on over one shoulder and a paper coffee cup in her other hand, and she saw him before he had decided what to do with his face, which meant she saw the real version of it. She stopped. He said, "Hi." She said, "You're actually here." "I said I would be." She looked at him. The same look she had given him at the farmer's market, at the library, on the phone in the parking lot, that specific unguarded attention that did not ask for anything back. "Ivy's asleep," he said. "She'll be mad she missed this. She'll recover." Simone set her bag down. She looked at Ivy sprawled in the airport seat with her head against the armrest. She looked at Griffin. The terminal was loud around them in the indifferent way of airports, announcements and rolling bags and the low roar of people in transit going everywhere. She said, "You built your life very carefully." He said, "So did you." "I know." A pause. "I'm not as careful as I used to be." He said, "Good." He did not reach for her. He let his hand rest open on the back of the seat between them, where it could be reached. She looked at it for one moment. Then she put her hand over it. Ivy, who was not actually asleep and had not been for several minutes, kept her eyes closed with the discipline of a child who understands that some moments require patience. That fall, the Maryville house on Birchwood Court had a new ramp at the front steps. Simone had designed it on a napkin the first Thursday she came for dinner. She had drawn the slope angle and the turn radius and the exact width in clean pencil lines, while Ivy told her about the first week of first grade. She had not made a project of it. She had just drawn it, folded the napkin, and left it on the counter. Griffin had built it the following weekend from the napkin. He was not a carpenter. He watched 4 instructional videos and called his neighbor twice. The ramp was functional, precise, and not beautiful, which Simone told him when she saw it, and then said she could fix the last part, and did the following Saturday with a belt sander and a can of the right stain. The Knoxville School Gymnasium was nominated for a Regional Civic Design Award that November. Simone flew down for the ceremony. Griffin flew with her. Patsy had taken 2 days off to watch Ivy, which she described as a hardship and which Ivy described as a vacation that included unlimited television and no opinion about sandwiches. At the award ceremony, the citation read out the principal designer's name and the room applauded, and Simone was standing next to Griffin in the 3rd row, and she did not go up to the stage. The presenter said, "Simone Adair, are you here?" Simone leaned over to Griffin and said quietly, "I hate this." Griffin put his hand at the small of her back. "Go," he said. She went. She stood at the podium and thanked the school board and Dr. Vance and the contractor and the structural engineer who was in the back row and gave one solemn nod. She did not give a speech. She said one sentence. "A space is worth what it lets people do inside it." She stepped back. The room stood. Griffin, in the 3rd row, watched her come back down the aisle toward him with the award in one hand and the expression of someone who has just done something she was always going to do but hadn't known it yet. He did not say anything. He moved his jacket off the seat beside him so she could sit down. She sat. She put the award on her knees. She put her hand on his arm. "Good? He's good," she said. On a Saturday in January, 8 months after the airport, the 3 of them were at the Portland Farmers Market. Ivy had grown another half inch. She had opinions now about coffee, which Griffin had not encouraged and which had emerged anyway, and which meant she stood at the cart with them and evaluated the options, with her arms crossed in a way that was either her father or her grandmother, and possibly both. They had been doing this in different cities since June, site visits that became dinners, dinners that became Saturdays, Saturdays in Portland, Saturdays in Maryville. One long weekend in Lowell where Simone walked them through the mill conversion, and Ivy asked 7 questions about the load-bearing walls and 1 question about whether the old mill had ghosts, which Simone answered seriously and specifically. It was not a thing they had announced. It was a thing they had built. The way you build the right thing, slowly, with attention to where the load goes, with patience for the moments when the plan needs to change, and the willingness to say so out loud instead of proceeding on the wrong drawing. Ivy picked up a stem of yellow tulips, the same stall as the year before. She turned and looked up at Simone. "These are your flowers," she said, not as a question. Simone crouched down. "Are they? You had them last time. At the market. You remember that?" Ivy looked at her with the candor of someone who has not yet learned to soften accurate observations. "I remember everything," she said. She placed the tulips in Simone's hands with the careful formality she usually reserved for bench. Simone held them. Griffin paid for the tulips without discussion. They walked out of the market into the Portland morning, which was cold and bright. After 3 days of rain, the light off the wet pavement coming up sharp and clean. Ivy ran ahead to the corner and waited, vibrating. Simone walked at Griffin's side, close enough to be near, far enough to have her own stride. He said, "She remembers everything." "I know," Simone said. "That means I have to be careful." "About what?" She looked at him. The same look, the one she'd had from the beginning, unguarded and specific, the one that did not perform itself. "About staying," she said. He held that for a moment without rushing past it. "Is that what you're thinking about?" he said. "Yes." And she looked at Ivy at the corner, waiting with her whole body the way she waited for things she was certain were coming. She looked at Griffin. She said, "I'm not going anywhere." He did not say anything back. He had learned in the months of this that some of her sentences were complete and did not need a response so much as a witness. He walked beside her the rest of the block. At the corner, Ivy took Simone's free hand on one side and Griffin's on the other without asking, because she had decided some time ago that this was an arrangement that had been agreed to and she had not been wrong. The light changed. They crossed.